Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Today's presentation will be about cushion zone jobs. Uh, Cushion zone jobs all have sufficient degree of risk that consequently require some modest precautionary steps to be taken. It's well known from its name, caution. It needs also some ergonomic awareness, training, and a hazard assessment. But on the other side, they don't necessarily have risks great enough to require corrective action. Not every caution zone job needs correction and have enough risk. Sometimes caution zone jobs may not be hazardous. Anyhow, the definition of caution zone job is the job in which a worker's typical work activities meet one or more of the physical risk factors and levels. So, what is the typical work activities? Typical work activities are those that are regular and predictable part of the job and occur on more than 1 day per week and more frequently than 1 week per year. We have 14 risk factors falling into 6 distinct categories. The first one is awkward postures of shoulders, arms, neck and back, or knees, including 4 risk factors. We'll discuss each in details. Second, the high hand force with 2 risk factors. Third, the highly repetitive motion of the neck, shoulders, elbows, wrists, or hands with 2 risk factors also. Fourth one, repeated impacts with the hands or knees with 1 risk factor. Fifth one is lifting objects, including 3 risk factors. And the last one, using tools that have high or moderate vibration, including 2 risk factors. The first one is awkward posture of the shoulders, arms, neck, back, or knees. Before discussing what would be the awkward posture, we have to know first what the ideal posture that is be followed by worker without feeling exhaustion or fatigue. We call it neutral posture at work. The neutral posture is the ergonomic standard for doing a job. For any time? No, yes, for a prolonged time without fatigue. So again, the neutral posture is the ergonomic standard, and standard here will underline. So it's the ergonomic standard for doing the job for a prolonged time without fatigue. Actually, the ideal position should support the natural curves of the body, especially spine, to maintain the body in a good alignment with the work. So the neutral posture at work should allow the body to achieve the greatest force potential with balance and control. The body must be in a good balance and in a good control to achieve the required job without feeling fatigue, without feeling exhaustion. For instance, we are giving here just an example. For instance, a golfer's swing that can be improved by correctly aligning his or her torso and arms pre-swing. Same can be said in the workplace. It is the ergonomic design or the ergonomic design should ensure that workers can maintain a neutral position as much as possible. Why? To avoid fatigue, to avoid exhaustion, to achieve good work or good job. The first awkward posture of the shoulders and arms. The first risk factor is working with the head or hands above the head or above the elbows, above the shoulder. So the first is working with hands above head or elbows above shoulder for more than 2 hours total per day. So the question now is, what's the ideal position for working in a good state. If we see these pictures, the neutral position of the arm should be fully adducted to the trunk. Why? To be supported by the trunk. And that of the forearm should be in a right angle with the arm. This is the neutral posture or position. Definitely, working in that position is not exhausting nor demanding, even if been prolonged or used for a long time. So can we examine, can we imagine now that working with shoulder flexion, extension, adduction, or abduction, either it's only or in combined position, definitely it will be exhausting and cannot be tolerated for prolonged time. Now, working with elbow flexion or extension will be exhausting if used for prolonged time, because we can imagine that the neutral position is right angle in between the arm and forearm. Can you imagine now if we have to work for a prolonged time, more than 2 hours, 3 hours, or even more than 10 minutes, we cannot maintain it working with flexed elbow for a prolonged time cannot be tolerated, or extended elbow cannot be tolerated. So we can imagine how hard and difficult to work in that position. Speaking about the hands, the neutral position of the hands should be in line with the forearm to feel comfortable during work. So working with ulnar or radial deviation of the hand is awkward position. Definitely, we cannot maintain working with the hands either deviated to ulnar or radial sides. So also working with flexed or extended hands are also awkward positions. Again, can you imagine now how painful and impossible to continue working with, for example, flexed or extended hand during ulnar or radial deviations? I believe it's very impossible except for not few minutes, for few seconds. As we see here, awkward posture of the neck or back. The risk factor here is working with the neck or back bent more than 30 degrees without support and without the ability to vary posture. She's working here in a fixed position with neck or back bent more than 30 degrees for more than 2 hours total per day. This is awkward position for maintaining work without exhaustion or fatigue. Awkward postures of the neck or back here again, working with the back either flexed or extended or even twisted about the waist or laterally bent, all are awkward positions. As we see, and couldn't be kept except for a few minutes. I see it cannot be tolerated except for a few seconds. Otherwise, this would be risky and exhausting, and even more predisposing to accidents. So it's very harmful to work with the back either flexed or extended, twisted about the waist, or even laterally bent. Nobody can maintain this position in work. Third one is squatting. The risk factor here is squatting more than 2 hours total per day. Okay, nobody can maintain it. Here it's 2 hours. Nobody can maintain squatting for 2 hours continuously. Nobody. Otherwise, he will be suffering of at least DVTs. 2 hours here may be interrupted total per day. Okay. We can see here in position E, squatting, the pressure point here in perfect squatting, but not prolonged, should be central in between the 2 feet. But if displaced to be in between the 2 heels, this means the pressure on the heels and knees with probable pressure on the vertebral column to support the body falling to the back. It's not perfect, it's not ideal, it will be very harmful. While the position C, if the pressure point is displaced to the forward to be in between the feet fingers, this means more pressure on the knees and back also. Why? To support the body against falling to the back. Anyhow, none of them could be maintained for no more than few minutes, otherwise the person will suffer of harmful effects. The fourth one is kneeling. The risk factor here is kneeling more than 2 hours total per day. Again, it's not continuous. It might be interrupted across the day. Kneeling can irritate, it's well known that kneeling can irritate the bursa on top of the kneecap. All of us know what's the knee bursa. Definitely, this will lead to pain, swelling, bursitis, and arthritis. The occupational kneeling is associated with usually with increased risk of tibiofemoral knee osteoarthritis. It's some sort of arthritis affecting those persons who are doing kneeling most of the time. It's well known among housemaids, among housewives. That's why it's called housemaid's wife. It's some sort of bursitis. It's called housemaid's wife bursitis. Okay. Also, second category. If we remember, we said before that we have 6 categories, each of them including some risk factors. We discussed the first category. Second category is high hand force. The high hand force, first risk factor is pinching. The risk factor here is pinching an unsupported object or objects weighing 2 or more pounds per hand, or pinching with a force of 4 or more pounds per hand. Here he means the pressure or the force more than 2 hours totally per day. This is comparable to pinching. He says that it's comparable to pinching half a ream of paper, collection of paper, half of it. So the first risk factor here is pinching. Second, gripping. The risk factor is gripping an unsupported object also, or objects weighing 10 or more pounds per hand, or gripping with a force, again here speaking about the force, or gripping with a force of 10 or more pounds per hand, again more than 2 hours. Here he is giving an example. This is comparable to clamping automobile jumper cables onto a battery. Regardless the type of gripping, we are not interested in studying the different types of gripping, but we usually say that workers who often use their hands in forceful gripping and pinching motion face a higher risk of developing carpal tunnel syndrome, which is well known that it's a painful condition causing some sort of symptoms like tingling, numbness, weakness in the hands, and so on. It's believed that low force repetitive hand motion and rest position, widely thought of as key risk factors, appear to be lower or of lower importance than forceful pinching and gripping. So, which means that pinching and gripping among workers doing hand intensive tasks are more risky than repetitive hand motion. Third category is highly repetitive motion of the neck, shoulders, elbows, wrists, or hands. The risk factor here is repeating the same motion with neck, with shoulders, with elbows, with wrists or hands, excluding here the keying activities, which is a distinctive and separate category. We will discuss it later. the repetition should be with little or no variation, which means it should be fixed. Such repetition should be every few seconds for more than 2 hours totally per day. So again, the risk factor is in highly repetitive, is repeating the same motion with the neck, shoulders, elbows, wrists, or hands, excluding keying, with little or no variation every few seconds for more than 2 hours per day. Repetitive motion disorders, as well known as a group of muscular conditions that result from repeating motions performed in the course of normal work or even in our daily activities in homes that causes the muscles and tendons to become damaged over time. By such repetition, the muscles and tendons may be damaged over time, causing disorders such as, for example, carpal tunnel syndrome. It may cause bursitis, tendinitis, epicondylitis, ganglion cyst, many disorders. So this is an ergonomic hazard also, including awkward movements in the form of repeating the same movement without variation over and over and over, with damaging of the used organs, just like muscles, tendons, ligaments, joints. Now, keying. Keying also is a risk factor. The risk factor is performing intensive keying more than 4 hours. Here it's for more than 4 hours total per day. The hazardous keying as using keyboard, using piano. We'll give examples now. The hazardous keying may cause sprains and strains in the muscles of the fingers and forearm, may cause even back injury, may cause soft tissue injuries of wrists, can cause harm to the arms, shoulders, neck, or legs, with a chronic pain. Examples here of keying: pianist's finger. Okay, other example: keyboard arthritis. Those who are using the keyboard for a long time, more than 4 hours per day, I believe that all of us are using the keyboard more than 5 and 6 hours per day. It can cause keyboard arthritis in our fingers, in joints, in the small fingers, in the small joints of fingers. Another example of keying: the carpal tunnel syndrome as a hazard. Tendinitis or mouse shoulder. It's well-known disorder among long users of keyboard. Tendinitis or mouse shoulder. Even tennis elbow. It's another type of tendinitis that's common among heavy computer users, called tennis elbow. It's named after athletes who experience high force during gaming with tennis in their arms and wrists. It's well known that it's from hitting a ball with a racket. However, the non-athletes here can have tennis elbow. All of us may have tennis elbow due to long use of keyboards. It occurs when tendons in the elbow become irritated due to repetitive motion of the wrist and forearm. Fourth category is repeated impacts with the hands or knees. Repeated impacts with the hands or knees. Here, the repeated impact, the risk factor here is using either the hand, either using the heel or the base of palm itself, or knees as a hammer more than 10 times per hour or more than 2 hours total per day. It's a high risk factor for it may cause muscle discomfort or weakness. It may cause injury, aches and pains, hot or cold feelings. it might, by the time, it might cause restricted range of movements due to severe type of arthritis. Fifth category is lifting objects. Heavy lifting, the risk factor here is lifting objects weighing more than 75 pounds once per day, or more than 55 pounds more than 10 times per day. So either lifting 75 pounds once per day, or more than 55 pounds more than 10 times per day. Frequent lifting, the risk factor here is lifting objects weighing more than 10 pounds if done more than twice per minute or more than 2 hours per day. Not or, I'm sorry. The lifting object here weighing more than 10 pounds if done more than twice per minute, more than 2 hours per day. Both together. Both conditions should be existing together. 12th, awkward lifting. The risk factor here is lifting objects weighing more than 25 pounds above the shoulders, below the knees or arm's length, more than 25 times per day. Again, it's lifting objects weighing more than 25 pounds above the shoulders, below the knees, or at arm's length, more than 25 times per day. Sixth category is using tools that have high or moderate vibration. So it means here working with vibrating tools. The first risk factor in sixth category is high hand-arm vibration. Risk factor here is using impact wrenches, for example, carpet strippers, chainsaws, percussive tools like jackhammers, scalers, riveting or chipping hammers, or other hand, or other any vibrating tools, or any other hand tools that typically have high vibration levels more than 30 minutes total per day. It's very risky, as we see, for more than 30 minutes total per day, not for 2 hours. Last risk factor is moderate hand-arm vibration. The risk factor here is using grinders, sanders, jigsaws, or other hand tools that typically have moderate vibration levels more than 2 hours per day. The question now, how do we look for caution zone jobs? We said before that not every workplace has caution zone jobs. So, however, we can spot them easily if we observe workers doing their jobs by what we call it walk through. If we remember that walk through is some sort of work environment monitoring. So the kind of work the employees perform and how many employees we have will determine the approach, how to correct it. One effective approach would be to plan a walkthrough review, ask employees and supervisors for the input, assess one type of job at a time using this pocket guide. That pocket guide may be electronic by using laptop, by using mobile phone, or by using just only by using like this. It may be fixed in mobile or might be in a written form. So the user should check each awkward position in the checklist and mark in the opposite square. Okay? It's very easy job. Now we can ask ourselves finally, what would be the effects of awkward postures? Usually the effects are known as occupational overuse syndrome, or can be defined as musculoskeletal disorders or repetitive strain injury. The occupational overuse syndrome, or OOS, was previously known as repetitive strain injury, or RSI. Anyhow, both names are not considered as medical diagnosis. So I cannot diagnose a patient or a worker in my clinic, for example, saying that he has occupational overuse syndrome. it's a description, it's a descriptive terminology as opposed to the diagnostic terms. So we call it now regional pain syndromes because both of them or both the names either occupational overuse syndrome or repetitive strain injury, both of them are describing muscle tension. So we call it muscle tension pain phenomena, or what we know now as regional pain syndrome. So regional pain syndrome is accepted more than occupational overuse syndrome. That's used as a descriptive terminology. Anyhow, what's occupational overuse syndrome by the end? It's a term covering a range of conditions that cause pain or discomfort to muscles, to joints, to tendons, nerves, or soft tissues, one of them or all of them, or two or three of them, due to injury caused by overuse. So it's covering a range of conditions that cause pain or discomfort, either in the muscles, the joints, tendons, the nerves, or soft tissues, one of them, two of them, all of them. Uh, what is the cause? Caused by overuse. The symptoms including swelling, pain, weakness in the affected joints. The main theory about the cause of occupational overuse syndrome is that it's caused by muscles being tense or tight for too long time. So it means here to acquire the syndrome, I must be using my muscles, my joints, my ligaments, my tendons, my soft tissues in a tense or a tight way for too long time. So a tense muscle squeezes. What happens? The tense muscle squeezes on the nourishing blood vessels, making them constricted, so that slowing the blood flow to the muscles, to the joints, to the ligaments, and everywhere in action. The muscles can store a little oxygen to cope with momentary tension. Take care here, please. First, we said that the tense muscle squeezes on the nourishing blood vessels, decreasing the blood flow to the working organ or to the working muscles. While the muscles can store a little oxygen only to cope with momentary tension, but when this is used up, the muscle must switch to a very inefficient form of energy production because it's deprived now from the blood supply. This uses the stored energy very quickly, tires the muscle, and leads to buildup of acid, lactic acid here, to buildup of acid waste products, which make the muscles hurt. Finally, as these wastes build up in the muscle, it becomes mechanically stiff, and this makes it still harder for the muscle to work. So, first, using muscles for a long time in a tense or a tight situation makes the muscle squeezes or presses on the blood vessels, squeezes the nourishing blood vessels, making them constricted and decreasing the blood flow to the working muscles and consequently the ligaments, the tendons, the joint. While the muscles cannot store enough oxygen for working too much time, it's a very little amount, so that after being used, the muscles will use another stored sources of energy with accumulation of lactic acid that can cause fatigue and causing the muscles to become mechanically stiff and harder for muscles to work. The muscle and tendons can withstand fatigue and are able to recover if two situations. They are given a variety of tasks and regular rest breaks. Again, after that story in the previous slide, we can say that muscles and tendons can withstand fatigue and are able to recover in two conditions. If they are given variety of tasks, not in a fixed way, and they have enough regular rest breaks. So, it may be the absence of variety and rest breaks that strains the muscles and tendons beyond their capacity for short term recovery. We can more explain it step by step. When muscles don't heal correctly, the rest of the body has to compensate for the weakened area, correct? This aspect can result in additional strain, overuse injuries, or fractures. As one common scenario, here the tendons connecting muscles to the bones, for example, or to joints, have to pick up the slack. Here is the monotony. We say here, if we go back to the definition in blue, it may be the OOS, I mean, it may be the absence of variety and rest breaks. Take care of variety here. Because we speak about the monotony, physiological and psychological repetitiveness may cause muscle tension, which can be relieved by the use of micro pauses. So again here, the rest is very important. So variety and rest, both of them are important to avoid OOS. It's proven that those who have gaps in muscle tension will have less or no pain compared to those who didn't have these gaps. Here again, the importance of the rest. So to avoid OOS, occupational overuse syndrome, there must be a variety in job doing. It's not, or it must be not in a fixed way, because even at least it will be boring for the worker. And each worker must have sufficient time of rest. OOS is often caused or aggravated by work that involves, we said before, that repetitive movement, strained posture or awkward posture, constructing postures, forceful movements. We discussed them all. Stress and working conditions, as well as non-occupational activities in our home or in recreation, or as in, for example, bending, climbing, crawling, reaching, twisting, overexertion, repetitive exposure for prolonged time. To develop OS, there are many occupational or many risk factors. Some of them are environmental, some of them are individual, and activity also. Definitely the environmental risk factors, definitely first of them, it will be poor work organization, environmental stresses, time pressure, management styles, for example, a boss behind my back, forcing me to do some sort of job in a very little time. This is a stressing factor. Other environmental risk factors like heat or cold, poor light, vibration, tool design, noise. The individual risk factors, first of them is psychological factors. How stressed I am to do such job. Stressing factor will be a risk factor here. Mental demands, I need money, for example, like all of us, behavioral characters. Third one is activity risk factors. Is it static or awkward position? Specific hand or body movement, improper gripping, improper lifting. The risk factors we have discussed before. Again, finally, we can say that the risk factors to develop occupational overuse syndrome depend mainly on, first, the frequency. We discussed it separately in each of the risk factors before. Some risk factors would be for few minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, like for example, the vibration, or for 2 hours or more than 2 hours, like 4 hours in keying and doing work on keyboard. So the first one is frequency, the number of repetitions of a periodic process in a unit of time. Examples for how many lifts per hour, how many keystroke per minute, how many cycles per 5 minutes. The tasks that have frequency, for example, entering data on a computer, keying here, packing and stacking or stocking cases, picking apples, for example, how many apples I pick in 1 hour. Second, the duration is very important. The time during which something exists or lasts. how long the cycles continue without a break, how long one cycle takes, how long one repeats a single activity without changing activity. For example, like running a piece of machinery, assembly work, carrying several objects one at a time from location to location. Force and exertion as risk factors. There is a difference definitely in between force and exertion. Force is the strength of energy that has been done or exerted or brought for doing, for example, to bear or to move something or to change active power, while exertion is the act or instance of sustained effort or lasting effect. Examples for lifting, for pushing, pulling, throwing, hurling, carrying, reaching, many tasks. Uh, Posture or position, the position or bearing of the body, whether characteristic or assumed for a special purpose. Examples: how one sits at the desk, the required body positions because of work station design, the body positions required to complete a task. All of those factors are ergonomic problems. The worker's choice of body positions regard assigned job, flexed, extended, twisted over his waist. Um, Tasks that force position or posture, reaching to remove something from top shelf, for example, or position of the body when working with non-adjustable office furniture. Many examples. Point of operation is the location of direct interface between the worker and the task, the point of pressing or pressure. For example, hammering a nail, here the location of the nail will be the point of operation or the point of pressure. For example, typing at computer, the location of the keyboard, the monitor, or wherever I am pressing. For example, picking up an object, the location of the object. Uh, Another risk factor of OOS, occupational overuse syndrome, is mechanical pressure. Like, for example, tool trigger with sharp edges on table, desk, keyboards, sharp edges on tool grips, sharp edges on boxes or hand tools. Sorry. All of those can cause a restriction of blood to the tendon, to the muscle, and restriction the tendon and muscle movement with or without loss of nerve sensation and even damage. The last risk factor is vibration. Very simply, vibration is either side-to-side movement or front-backward movement. It's very simply oscillation. Vibration either local, like what's happening among driller operators. Some of them may develop vibration-induced white finger, or whole body vibration, like among, for example, train drivers. Uh, what else? Okay, occupational overuse syndrome can be classified into three groups: either localized inflammatory conditions, like what's happening in tendonitis, tenosynovitis, trigger finger, rotator cuff syndrome. And by the way, I have rotator cuff syndrome, but was due to injury, slipping. Anyhow, bursitis, muscle pain, epicondylitis, all of them are localized inflammatory conditions. Second is compression syndrome, definitely like carpal tunnel syndrome, like ulnar nerve compression, like radial nerve compression. Last one is pain syndromes, chronic pain syndromes, fibromyalgia, regional pain syndrome. There's often an overlap between a localized condition and more generalized OS. definitely no one can be classified that he has only localized inflammatory condition or only compression syndrome or only pain syndrome. The situation is almost mixed and complex because those persons who have usually tenosynovitis or trigger finger, for example, or carpal tunnel syndrome, they have chronic pain syndrome also. So no single diagnosis. Sorry. Okay. Occupational overuse syndrome, the symptoms occur mainly in the shoulders, in the neck, in the arms, in the hands, in the back, aching pain in the muscles and tendons, nerve pain. It's usually pain radiating along nerve pathways. The person might have muscle spasm, may suffer weakness and stiffness, may suffer numbness and tingling, burning pain, hot or cold feelings, feeling of tiredness, headache, and anxiety, and even loss of concentration. Here's one example of the OS syndrome, which is occupational overuse syndrome, is the trochanteric parasites. It's the pain area in the trochanteric parasites. Usually, this type of parasites is acquired on working for a prolonged time in awkward position or awkward position. Uh, Usually, it will be acquired among those who are usually twisting themselves during work, either to the right or to the left, twisting over the axis of their waist. It causes some sort of friction in the joint. If such a friction is so frequent and occurs most of the work day, usually they acquire some sort of parasites in the trochanteric bursa. Here's also vertebral problems due to awkward position. Definitely this type of carrying heavy objects from the ground is very risky, and it causes some sort of pressure over the discs with vertebral problems. Usually they acquire some sort of disc prolapse. At last, and I believe this is the last slide in my presentation. Occupational overuse syndrome usually doesn't happen in a short time. It usually needs a very prolonged time because it's happening gradually over a period of time. Usually may happen among or after many years of working in such awkward positions, but we can say that awkward position, severe awkward position, for example, like carrying heavy object in a wrong way from the ground, may cause sudden disc collapse. It's an occupational overuse syndrome that occurs in seconds or in minutes. But the rule is occupational overuse syndrome usually needs a time to be acquired with working for a long time in awkward positions. At last, I hope that my presentation wouldn't be so boring, and I hope you have got benefit, and I'm ready for any question by the end of the day. And I take the chance to thank Dr. Laila, who gave me that great opportunity to present to you. And inshallah, hoping to see you, inshallah, in another presentation. Thank you, and ready for questions.